Hey, this is Rob, and you're listening to the Hidden Destination podcast. I believe this is episode 9, and wow, hard to believe, already 9 episodes. And today is 8/26, August 26th, 2024, and I'm going to be recapping yesterday's ride on 8/25 from Fargo, North Dakota to Strawberry Lake Minnesota. I rode 71 miles with 2,000 feet of climbing, and it was, as I expected, very challenging given the crosswind. I knew yesterday that if the winds didn't shift significantly, I was going to be paying for it sort of on my return journey back east. And sure enough, I did. So that was challenging. Yesterday I rode from Fargo, North Dakota, to an amazing little spot called Woodlands Trail Resort, and that was sort of my savior. Was Woodlands Trail. That was the only place I was able to find in terms of sleeping for the night, and it ended up being an incredible experience. So I'll get into that later on. Well, actually, the story sort of begins yesterday morning. While I was packing up, I was sitting on the toilet, and I thought the night prior I had exhausted pretty much all of my options in terms of places to stay. I had called a bunch of folks that morning as soon as they opened, asking for cabins and campgrounds and that sort of thing, and there was just nothing. So fortunately, the adventure cycling app doesn't. They have like a lot of good sort of resources on there, but it's definitely not all inclusive. So you have to do your due diligence and look around to, Google and other places, HipCamp, and the adventure cycling app uses Google. They sort of use that as their embedded map structure that they overlay sort of their database on. And I did see like a little, next to Strawberry Lake, which is just off the northern tier route, I did see a little like camping logo next to the lake. So I clicked on that, and it said Woodlands Resort, or Woodlands Trail Resort and Campground. It's like, ooh, okay. So I went on their website and noticed that there were 2-night minimums for everything, no camping options. So I called the number and left a voicemail, and then an incredibly nice woman named Dawn returned my phone call and informed me that, in fact, there's unfortunately no camping, not many camping options around. I kind of told her I was in a bit of a bind, and I, is there any way I could pitch my tent there? Are there any cabins available? And, long story short, she said, no, 2-night minimum. It was going to be a little cost prohibitive. And then we sort of managed to work out a bit of an arrangement where, because a lot of the cost for keeping up with the cabins that they have on the property is the labor that goes into it the next day, cleaning up, doing dishes, changing sheets, getting the place tidied up. And I was like, listen, I'll be, I'm camping a lot of the times. I'll be low impact. You don't need to do anything to prep the place. I'll leave it just as I found it. Like, I'll sleep on my sleeping pad. I will obviously do all the dishes, clean up. And so we managed to work out a pretty reasonable price, just in terms of the fact that I was going to be as low impact as possible. And so that was negotiated in the morning. So I felt good going into the ride, knowing I had a place to sleep that night. So yeah, I left the hotel that I was at in Fargo, and went to the coffee shop and recorded yesterday's episode, and cruised down through Fargo. It was a cool little city, cool little town. Like I said, it reminded me a lot of Fort Collins, and got on my way at about 11, which was or 11:30 rather, which was a super late start. And out of town, I was heading north, so I had a pretty good tailwind, which led me to believe as soon as I cut east, it was going to get gnarly. And sure enough, as soon as I cut east, it was just brutal. It felt like somebody threw an additional 50 pounds on my bike. The crosswind was so strong because, I mean, I was still, granted I had crossed over into Minnesota, but it was still sort of the landscape of North Dakota. So it's flat, open, just, ample opportunity for the winds to blow as strong as they wish to blow. And there's nothing more defeating than that. There's, I was actually talking to Mike the other day at the brewery that the most defeating, discouraging thing on a bicycle, especially a loaded touring bike, is being on the flats with wind. And yeah, that was the case. Yesterday, it was, in looking at my map, I had just an enormous stretch of east to, or west to east, of just flat open, pretty much all the way from where I turned to start traveling east, outside of Fargo, all the way to Richwood, Minnesota, which was about 50 miles. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge. So I just kind of buckled down, and just got into a lower gear and just pedaled, and persisted. I turned a lot of that roadway, because it was quiet, into a nice meditation. So I listened to some Tibetan chants, which I've been doing, while I just kind of zone in on the breath and the body. And, when the going gets tough, that's definitely a really profound technique to just sort of decontrive everything, in a sense, where you're not focused on the challenge of the matter. You're more just in tune with, how the body feels on the bike, the breath, the cadence, your posture. It's almost like a yoga position, just, actually it is by definition yoga. And that definitely is a powerful way to cut through challenging situations. So that's what I did, and ended up getting into Callaway at about 4:30 ish. I went to the only gas station there and ate some lunch. I packed all my food. They let me eat in the store, and then grabbed some some frozen veggies for dinner, and made my way to towards Richwood, which was the final town prior to Strawberry Lake. And I had plotted out Zyn Zyn Zalabin time, which is something I've been doing. And if you don't know what Zyn Zyn Zalabin time is, go listen to episode 8 towards the end. I sort of plot that on the map, so I have another like sort of push to look forward to after lunch. And so I had plotted that out after a climb towards Richwood. And I was looking forward to coming out of Richwood almost all day, because I was like, oh, I know that as soon as I hit Richwood, I'm going to be out of the crosswind, and I'll probably have a bit of a tailwind at my back, because it sort of travels a bit more in the northern direction. So there's stretches of northbound secondary streets that allow you to probably catch a little bit of that tailwind. And as I made my way farther into farther into Minnesota, the sort of elevation profile changes, so you get a bit more hills, a bit more bluffs, and definitely more trees. So that cuts down on the wind. So that's that was nice, but so I hit Richwood. Well, I hit Zyn Zyn Zalabin time, which was great. I enjoyed the citrus variety, and threw on some music, and then started to cruise it and hit Richwood. And I was like, okay, I'm in Richwood, great. And I had missed the street I was supposed to turn down, so I looped back around, and I noticed that the streets I was looking forward to sort of send me to Strawberry Lake were totally chewed up. So the road was closed, through traffic only, and it was they were doing construction on the road, and you could ride down it, but it was brutal. It was all basically like loamy, sandy, chewed up road with no shortage of like washboard sections. So if anybody's driven down dirt roads, they know that like after a certain number of cars, after traffic accumulates on them, it turns to washboard, which is just that like corrugated, like bumpy, like constant bumpy feeling. And it was pretty much all of that, which is a horrible combination. It reminded me of when Andrus and I rode out to Nebraska through the plains of Colorado, and we were on a bunch of these back roads, and it was just sand and washboard. Where like you'll get caught in some thick stuff, and it just kind of sends you off your bike. And there was definitely no shortage of hills either. So it was tricky. It wasn't. Fortunately, it had ended after about like 5 miles. But that 5 miles just really, like, you could only go about 5 miles an hour. And it was not what I was expecting. But that's how this all goes. So Zyn Zyn Zalabin time was definitely thwarted a little bit, but I was happy to have the assistance and the additional concentration. So yeah, I ended up making it to Strawberry Lake by about 7:15 or so. I had messaged Dawn and met her at the camp office, and she was just an amazing individual. We had a great conversation, told her about my trip, and she sort of gave me the rundown of the cabin. The property is just gorgeous. It's right on this little lake, super clear, super clean lake. And there's a bunch of cabins and RVs and trailers sort of lining the waterfront. It's awesome. It's really great. And we get to chatting, and she ends up giving me a little bit more of a discount, which was just insanely generous. And takes me down to the cabin, and it's this super cute little, very small footprint cabin with a kitchen and some bathrooms, and it was just perfect. Just perfect. I ended up doing a bit of a swim. As soon as I got here, just with my bibs on, just jumped in the water, which felt incredible after an insanely hot day. And then, yeah, cooked up some dinner and slept harder than I've slept in quite a while. So, huge thanks to Dawn. Huge thanks to the Woodlands Trail Resort and Campground for this awesome stay. So, back to camping tonight. Finally, then I'll be intersecting a lot more campgrounds. So that's definitely a relief. I am out of the stretch of nothingness. And yeah, we'll see how today goes. There's a lot of cool things to look forward to today, and some bigger towns as I make my way towards Walker, and just counting down the days until Friday when I get to see the one and only Claire. So really, really, really anticipating her visit. And I put a ton of this sort of like big old loop that, and maybe I should post a picture of sort of the northern tier loop that I'm doing, because I am effectively looping back to like the Bullis area. I've been putting bigger miles in, so I have miles in the bank, just in case something goes wrong, just so I'm able to make it to St. Cloud by Friday, which is the goal. So I'm definitely got a lot of miles in the savings account, and whether or not I want to spend those, I'm not sure. But yeah, just want to really make sure nothing gets in the way of getting the most out of the time with Claire, because it's been almost 6 weeks, been 6 weeks-ish since I've seen her, so that's too long. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Until from Strawberry Lake, until next time, ta-ta.